Night shift. I took the job at Linden Gas and Go because it was easy. Night shifts at a gas station meant long hours of boredom, scrolling my phone, drinking shitty coffee, and occasionally selling cigarettes to truckers. But last night, I learned the real reason no one keeps this job for long. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, something else comes through. And I don't think it's human. 11:47 p.m., the storm rolls in. The night started like any other. Empty roads, flickering neon lights, the low hum of the refrigerator coolers. Outside, dark clouds rolled in over the highway. A storm was coming. I watched the rain start to drizzle against the glass, tapping my fingers on the counter, trying to stay awake. Then, the power flickered. The lights dimmed. The radio behind the counter cut to static. And in that split second of half-darkness, I saw something move outside. A shadow. Something tall. Something standing at the edge of the lot, just beyond the reach of the flickering lights. Watching, I blinked, and it was gone. 12:10 a.m., the car that never opened. Car pulled up to pump 2. Old, rusted, no headlights. It just sat there, engine idling in the rain. Nobody got out. I watched for a few minutes, waiting for the driver, waiting for anything, but nothing happened. Just the sound of rain and the low hum of the engine. I sighed, pushing myself up from the stool. Maybe they'd fallen asleep. Maybe they needed help. I grabbed the umbrella from behind the counter and stepped outside. The air was thick with static. The storm was closer now. I knocked on the driver's side window. No response. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. Finally, I took a step back, squinting through the fogged-up glass. And that's when I noticed. The driver was already looking at me. His face was pressed up against the glass. Mouth stretched open. Eyes too wide. Not blinking, just staring. A low sound came from inside the car. Like humming. Deep. Wrong. I stumbled back. The driver's mouth kept opening. Wider and wider until the power cut out. 12:13 a.m., the darkness. The gas station was plunged into blackness. The only light came from outside. The flickering neon sign. The pale glow of the storm. And inside the car, the driver was still there. Still staring. Still humming. Only now, his mouth was too big. Too wide for any human jaw. I turned and ran back inside, slamming the door. My breath came fast. The power was still out, but the emergency lights above the door kicked on, casting long shadows across the aisles. Then, somewhere deep in the station, I heard a thud, followed by another, and another, like something heavy was knocking on the walls. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter and clicked it on. The aisles were empty, the coolers were quiet, but the knocking, it was coming from the storage room. I swallowed. I was the only one here, wasn't I? 12:20 a.m., the thing in the storage room. The knocking stopped the moment I reached the door. I hesitated, heart hammering. Then, slowly, I reached for the handle. The door swung open on its own. My flashlight flickered. The room was dark, but there was something inside. A shape standing in the back corner. Tall. Too tall. It twitched as the light hit it, shifting unnaturally, like it wasn't made for this world. I took a step back, and it moved, not like walking, like it was glitching forward, covering too much distance too fast. A sound filled the air, a horrible, wet clicking, like something was trying to speak. Then, a whisper. You looked. I slammed the door and bolted it shut. 12:45 a.m., the windows. I backed away, breath shaking. Then I heard it, a tapping sound. Slow, deliberate, coming from the windows. I turned and felt my blood run cold. They were standing there, dozens of them, pressed up against the glass. Figures in dark, wet clothing, faces stretched, eyes black voids. Their mouths didn't move, but I heard them whispering, "Let us in, let us in, let us in." I grabbed the bat from behind the counter. "Go away!" I shouted, voice cracking. They didn't react. They just kept tapping. And then, the door chime dinged. Someone had come inside, but I hadn't seen the door open. 12:50 a.m., the man at the counter. I turned back toward the counter. A man stood there, tall, motionless. His face was almost human, but his eyes were too deep, and his mouth, it was too wide. He grinned. "You shouldn't have looked." Then, the lights flickered, and everything went black. The aftermath. When I woke up, the sun was rising. The storm was gone. The gas station was normal. The power was back. The coolers were humming. But the security cameras? The footage from midnight to sunrise was missing. Like those hours never existed. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And as I stood there, trying to convince myself it was just a nightmare, my eyes drifted toward the front window. And that's when I saw it. A smudge on the glass. A handprint, long and human, and written beneath it, in something dark and smudged. "See you next shift. Don't look at them." I never wanted to work the night shift at McCready's Gas and Convenience, but rent wasn't going to pay itself. The station sits on the outskirts of town, the last stop before miles of empty road. Nothing but woods and silence past our flickering neon sign. Most nights, the only visitors are truckers, drunks, or the occasional lost driver looking for a bathroom. But last night, something else came through, and I don't think I was supposed to survive. 11:45 p.m., the start of my shift. It was a dead night. No customers, no deliveries. Just the hum of the old radio behind the counter and the buzzing overhead lights. I kept checking my phone, counting the hours until sunrise. Then, just before midnight, headlights appeared on the road. Car was coming. I straightened up, expecting it to pull in. But it didn't. It slowed just enough for me to see the driver's face through the windshield, and then it sped up again. Gone. That should have been my first warning. Because the driver's face, there was something wrong with it. Like it had too many eyes. 12:07 a.m., the knock at the door. I was trying to shake the image from my mind when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. A soft, deliberate tapping on the glass door. I looked up. A man stood just outside. Tall, motionless, dressed in a dark coat. His face was hidden in shadow. I hesitated. I hadn't heard a car pull in. For a long moment, we just stood there, staring at each other through the glass. Then slowly his hand lifted, and he pointed, not at me, at the security cameras above the door. A cold feeling crept up my spine. I turned to glance at the monitor behind the counter. Every camera was working except the one pointed at the front door. That feed was just static. I looked back at the man. He was gone. 12:15 a.m., the stranger in the aisle. I was still staring at the empty parking lot when the door chime dinged. Someone had come inside, but I hadn't seen the door open. I turned slowly, heart hammering. A man stood in aisle 3, the same tall figure in a dark coat. But now, I could see his face, and I wished I hadn't. His eyes were wrong. Too large, too dark, like twin black holes, pulling in the dim light of the store. His mouth, it wasn't smiling. It wasn't anything, just stretched. A silent, gaping expression. I gripped the counter, my fingers cold and sweaty. "Sir, can I help you?" I forced out. He didn't answer. He just tilted his head. Then, his mouth moved, not like he was talking, like something was moving underneath his skin. I swallowed hard. "Sir, if you're not buying anything, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." He took a step forward, and then the power cut out. 12:20 a.m., the darkness. The gas station was plunged into pitch-black silence. No humming lights, no buzzing radio, just the sound of breathing, and it wasn't mine. I flicked on my phone flashlight, sweeping it toward aisle 3. The man was gone. My stomach twisted. Then, the knocking started again. Not from the door, from the windows. I spun around, heart hammering. Outside, they were everywhere. Tall figures in dark coats, standing shoulder to shoulder, pressing their hands and faces against the glass. Watching, I stepped back, chest heaving. Then I noticed, their faces weren't faces at all. Just flat, blank skin, like something wearing a human mask without holes for eyes or a mouth. And they were knocking, not in unison, Not in rhythm, just frantic, desperate, loud. Knock, 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 knock. I stumbled back and slammed into something solid. Someone was standing behind me. 12:25 a.m. The whisper. I didn't want to turn around, but I had to. I lifted my phone flashlight. The man from aisle 3 was right behind me, his head tilted, that horrible, stretched mouth opening too wide. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. He leaned in, breath cold against my cheek, and in a voice too many-layered, he whispered, "Don't look at them." Then the lights flickered back on, and he was gone. So were the figures at the windows. 12:30 a.m., the security footage. I staggered toward the counter, my body shaking. The monitors were back on. I rewound the footage, and my stomach dropped, because the tape showed nothing. No man in aisle 3, no figures at the windows, just me, standing alone, talking to nothing, backing away from nothing. And yet, I could still feel them, watching, waiting. 12:45 a.m., the last warning. I was about to call my manager when I noticed something. A smudge on the glass of the front door. I walked over, breath shallow. Pressed against the glass was a single bloody fingerprint, and just below it, written in something dark and dripping, were 3 words. "See you soon." I didn't finish my shift. I didn't clock out. I just grabbed my keys and ran. And as I sped away down the dark highway, I forced myself not to look in the rearview mirror, because I knew, if I did, they would be there. The last shift. I work the night shift at a gas station off Route 46. It's the kind of place where the only customers after midnight are truckers, drunks, and the occasional lost soul looking for a bathroom. But last night, something came through that wasn't human. And I don't think I was ever supposed to leave. 11:59 p.m., the start of the shift. The night started like any other. I was alone, half listening to the staticky radio while scrolling through my phone. Outside, the fluorescent lights buzzed against the darkness. Beyond them, just miles of empty road and black trees. Nothing ever happened out here, until it did. 12:21 a.m., the first visitor. Car rolled up to pump 3. An old sedan, its paint peeling, headlights off. That was the first thing that struck me as odd. Why drive down a pitch-black highway with no lights? The second thing? The driver never got out. The engine ticked in the cold air, but no door opened. No movement inside. I watched through the window, waiting. Minutes passed. Then, the door dinged. I turned, expecting to see someone. But the station was empty. The door had opened, but no one was there. A chill crawled up my spine. I leaned over the counter, peering toward the door. The sensors weren't faulty. They only went off if something moved through them. I swallowed hard. Outside, the car at pump 3 was still there. Still empty. I forced a breath. Maybe someone had gone to the bathroom? I stepped out from behind the counter, moving toward the narrow hall where the restrooms were. That's when I noticed the bathroom light was off. If someone had gone in, wouldn't they have turned it on? I hesitated. Then, the knocking started. 12:30 a.m., the knocking. Not from the front door, not from the bathroom, but from the storage room in the back. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. No one had gone back there. I would have seen them. I was the only one working, the only one with a key. And yet, knock, knock, knock. Something was inside. I backed away, my breath coming fast. The store suddenly felt too quiet. Even the buzzing lights seemed to have dimmed. I reached under the counter, fingers brushing the baseball bat we kept for security. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. Silence. I waited. Nothing. Just my own shaky breaths. I swallowed and turned back toward the counter, and that's when I saw the man standing at the coffee station. 12:33 a.m., the man in black. I jumped so hard I nearly dropped the bat. He hadn't been there a second ago. He was tall, too tall, dressed in a long black coat, his face hidden by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. The air around him felt wrong, like the temperature had dropped a few degrees. He didn't move, didn't pour coffee, just stood there, waiting. I forced myself to speak. Need help? Slowly, too slowly, he turned toward me. I felt my stomach twist. His face, it was almost human, but his skin was stretched too tight, his eyes too deep, and his mouth, it was too wide, like someone had taken a knife and carved it bigger than it should be. And then, he smiled, a horrible, wrong smile, something ancient and hungry. My blood turned to ice. I gripped the bat tighter. "Sir, do you need something?" I asked, my voice shaking. He tilted his head, and then, in a voice that sounded too many layered, he whispered, "They are here," and the power went out. 12:40 a.m., the darkness. The store was plunged into blackness. The humming lights, the buzzing refrigerator coolers, everything died at once. And with it, the silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore. I could hear things in the dark. Breathing, shuffling, something moving just out of sight. My chest tightened. I gripped the bat, my knuckles white. Then, a whisper. "Let us in." It was everywhere, coming from the aisles, from the ceiling, from inside my own head. "Let us in." I stumbled back. My foot hit something. A flashlight. I grabbed it, flicking it on, and instantly wished I hadn't, because standing at the windows, pressed against the glass, were dozens of them, tall, silent, faceless, their featureless heads tilted in unison as the light hit them. I choked on a scream. Then, they started knocking, all at once, loud, fast, desperate. The windows shook. The door rattled. They were trying to get inside. 12:50 a.m., the escape. I ran. To the back. To the storage room. I didn't care anymore. I just needed to get away. I grabbed the handle, yanking it open, and froze. The tall man in black was inside, waiting. His grin stretched wider. "Wrong choice," he whispered. Then, the door slammed shut behind me, and everything went black. The aftermath. I don't know what happened after that. When I woke up, it was morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The store was empty. No tall man. No knocking. Just normal. Like none of it had happened. But when I checked the security cameras, the footage was missing. Everything from 12:21 a.m. to 6 a.m. gone. Erased. Like the night had been wiped away. But there was one thing left. A message scrawled across the counter in black marker. Just 4 words. "See you next shift." Last stop. I've worked the graveyard shift at the Clarks Hill Gas and Go for almost a year now. It's a small station, tucked off a forgotten highway that barely gets any traffic after midnight. The kind of place where the neon open 24 hours sign hums louder than the customers. I thought I had seen it all, drunks, tweakers, truckers with dead eyes, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened last night. Something I can't explain. Something I don't think I'm supposed to understand. And now I don't think I'm supposed to be alive. 11:57 p.m., the stranger. It started like any other shift. The place was empty, save for the soft buzz of the security monitors and the occasional rustling of the wind outside. Then, just before midnight, a car pulled in. An old, rust-covered sedan. No headlights. It rolled to a stop by pump 3, but no one got out. I watched the monitors, waiting. The seconds stretched too long. Then, the door dinged. A man stepped inside. Tall, gaunt, dressed in a black hoodie with the hood pulled low over his face. He didn't look at me, didn't go to the fridge or the snack aisle or the register. He just stood there, like he was listening. A cold, uneasy feeling crept up my spine. Hey, I called out, trying to sound casual. Need gas? No response. He turned slowly, his movements unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. Then finally he spoke. His voice was wrong, like 2 people talking at once. No, but they do. I frowned. Who? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He set it on the counter and slid it toward me. Lock the doors, he whispered. Then he turned and walked back outside. I stared after him, my heart hammering. What the hell was that? I grabbed the key, my fingers ice cold. Through the window, I watched him climb back into the rusted sedan. The engine never turned over. The car just disappeared, like it had never been there at all. 12:13 a.m., the second visitor. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I imagined it. But then, just past midnight, a woman ran inside. She was barefoot, wearing a ripped dress, her hair wild and matted, and her eyes, they were pure terror. "Please," she gasped, "lock the doors." My stomach dropped. I still had the key in my hand. "Are you okay?" I asked, stepping out from behind the counter. She shook her head violently. "They're coming," she whispered. "They're almost here." I swallowed hard. The wind outside had picked up, howling against the glass. I turned toward the doors, and that's when I saw them. Figures. Tall, thin shapes emerging from the tree line beyond the lot. At first, they looked like shadows, moving unnaturally, slipping between the flickering lights. But as they got closer, I saw their faces. Or rather, their lack of faces. Just smooth, featureless skin. My breath hitched. I fumbled with the key, hands shaking, and shoved it into the lock. Click. The woman let out a choked sob. "They found me," she whispered. Her voice was flat, emotionless. And then she smiled. Not a smile of relief. A smile that was too wide, like her skin was stretching to hold it. My stomach turned to ice. I took a slow step back. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered. She tilted her head. Then she laughed. Low, hollow. The lights above us flickered, and behind her, the figures reached the glass. 12:33 a.m., the knocking. I was trapped. Outside, they gathered, pressing their featureless faces against the glass. Their hands knocked, soft at first, then harder. The woman, asterisk if she was even human, asterisk turned to face them. She pressed her palm to the glass and whispered something I didn't understand. The knocking stopped, and the air grew heavy, like something was listening. I reached for the phone under the counter, heart pounding. No dial tone, no signal. The screen was just static. And then, the lights went out. Pitch black. The darkness swallowed everything. I couldn't see my own hands. I couldn't hear the knocking anymore. Just a low whisper, coming from everywhere. "Let us in." I squeezed my eyes shut. "No," I whispered back, a breath right against my ear. "Then we'll come inside anyway." 12:59 a.m., the end of the shift. I don't remember what happened next. 1 second, the darkness was suffocating. The next, I was standing outside. The sun was rising. The store was empty. No figures. No woman. No sign anything had ever happened. Except, the key was still in my hand. And the front door was locked from the inside. Aftermath. I quit that morning. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't explain. I just left. But I keep checking the security feeds. And last night, at 12:13 a.m., a rusted sedan pulled into the lot. The camera glitched, and a figure, tall, thin, stepped inside. The same man, the same key, like it was starting all over again. And I know, if I go back, they'll be waiting,